husband and his female best friend went to a concert without me. Then he started acting strange. I snooped and discovered she confessed her feelings for him after he came home. Late. Something really strange is going on between my husband, Phil, and my best friend, Dana. I can't figure out if I'm just overthinking things or if there's actually something suspicious going on. Phil and I have been married for 4 years, and we're both in our early 30s. We've always been very happy together, and he loves me a lot. However, I've caught him lying a few times to protect my feelings, and it's something I don't really appreciate. Dana and I have been best friends since college, and we were even roommates back then. To give you some background, Dana was in a long-term relationship for 3 years, but they broke up last year. Her ex was very insecure and controlling about who Dana spent time with, and he was particularly jealous of Phil for some reason. Because of this, Dana's ex would avoid hanging out with us. But since their breakup, Dana and I have gotten a lot closer. We spend a lot of time shopping, eating out, and just enjoying each other's company. Phil sometimes tags along, but not always. He and Dana get along well, and she's even joked that if I find another Phil, I should set her up on a blind date ASAP. About a month ago, Phil, Dana, and I had planned to go to a concert in town. Phil was super excited because it was one of his favorite bands. Unfortunately, I started feeling unwell that morning and just wanted to rest. Phil was disappointed but said we could give the tickets to our friends and catch the band some other time. Not wanting to spoil his fun, I called a few friends, and our mutual friend Jess was happy to take my place. Phil was reluctant to go without me, but I insisted. They all went and seemed to have a great time. Phil kept sending me photos throughout the night. The concert ended around 11:00 p.m., but I had already fallen asleep due to my medication. When I woke up the next morning, I found myself alone in bed. I quickly checked my messages, and Phil's last one was from 11:00 p.m., saying they were leaving the concert and he'd be home soon after dropping Dana off. When I went to the living room, I saw Phil sleeping on the sofa in the same clothes he wore to the concert. I waited for him to wake up and asked about his night and when he got home. He said he came back between 2 to 3 a.m. because there were multiple accidents outside the concert venue, causing horrible traffic. He mentioned dropping Dana off and coming straight home. I asked why he slept on the sofa, and he said he didn't want to disturb me and was too tired to change out of his clothes. Phil had some glitter on his clothes from dancing in the crowd, so he just crashed on the sofa. This seemed plausible, and Dana confirmed the story. However, things started to get weird after that night. Phil stopped coming along when I hung out with Dana, always coming up with unbelievable excuses. He's also been a bit distant with me since then and spends a lot more time in his home office playing video games at night instead of coming to bed. 2 weeks ago, I invited Dana over for drinks after we went shopping, but she gave reasons to avoid coming. She hasn't visited our place since that day. The only time Phil and Dana saw each other was at a house party last weekend, and they were both avoiding each other. I asked Phil why he was avoiding Dana, and he said it was just my imagination. Dana said the same, but kept giving me flimsy excuses for not coming over. I feel in my gut that their behavior is suspicious, but I'm not sure if it's just my insecurity. How do I figure out what's going on? I've checked Phil's phone multiple times, but the ages between him and Dana are sparse and stop after that night. I feel something happened between them, but they're both avoiding my questions about why they're acting so strangely. Am I wrong for assuming the worst? I don't want to come off as insecure, but this is eating me up inside. I've read a lot of comments on my situation, and some people think something definitely happened that night, but the question is, what? One commenter suggested that maybe Dana had always had a thing for Phil, given her ex's jealousy and her comment about setting her up with him. They advised confronting both of them together to get to the truth. While I want to do that, I'm scared of the consequences. What if I'm wrong? Not only could I lose a friend, but Phil would be upset that I accused him of something terrible. Another commenter suggested asking our other friend Jess if she noticed anything strange about Phil and Dana's behavior that night. They recommended confronting Phil and Dana, not to accuse them of cheating outright, but to express that their behavior is making me uncomfortable and I'd rather not be kept in the dark if there's an issue. I talked to Jess but didn't directly ask her about any suspicious behaviors. She only mentioned that they all had a fun time and that she took the train home while Phil and Dana went to the parking lot after the concert. One of the reasons this is so concerning to me is because Phil came home really late. He never sleeps on the sofa, but it was the first time he did in years. Plus, he had glitter all over his body. And I found glitter in the passenger seat of his car. This whole situation just doesn't sit right with me. So, the next day in his car, where Dana was probably sitting, I noticed some glitter. Maybe it's nothing, but my mind went into overdrive and I just couldn't figure out how to bring it up without sounding all paranoid or crazy. Someone, I think their handle was something like Narwhal834, suggested checking if the glitter was on his clothes or directly on his skin. Well, it turned out it was on high, as clothes and arms. My guess? They hugged, which isn't really a big deal. He did take a shower afterward, so I couldn't say if it was anywhere else on his body. All right, so here's an update from last week about my husband Phil and my best friend Dana, acting all weird around each other after they went to a concert together. I really want to thank everyone for helping me out with my tech questions and all the support. Sorry for the long post, but here's what went down. I confronted Phil and Dana and got the whole story. On Friday night, I managed to get my hands on Phil's phone for a bit. I didn't have time to retrieve deleted messages, but shout out to the person who suggested I check his photo gallery. I found photos from that night, and something stood out. Dana's outfit. She wore a white shirt and denim shorts to the outdoor concert. At some point, she took off her shirt and was just wearing a blue bikini top with some glittery fake tattoos on her shoulders and back. By the end of the night, her shirt was back on. So for there to be glitter in Phil's car and on his clothes, she must have taken off her shirt in the car. I was fuming and couldn't hold it in any longer. I confronted Phil. He broke down immediately and started apologizing. He admitted he felt guilty all month and didn't tell me because he knew I'd be upset and he just wanted to forget it ever happened. He told me the whole story. Dana and another friend, Jess, got pretty drunk at the concert. Phil had to help Dana to the car, and she slept for an hour while he drove. When she woke up, she started blasting music and singing. She then said it was hot and took off her shirt before Phil could lower the AC. Phil said he felt super uncomfortable and suggested driving to our house so she could sleep in the guest room, but Dana insisted on going home. When they got to her place, she asked Phil to walk her to her apartment because she still felt tipsy. At the door, she hugged him and thanked him, but the hug lingered too long, and they had a moment. I asked Phil if they kissed, and he said no, but there was definitely something there. Dana invited him in, but Phil said he had to leave and ran back to the car. After he came home, Dana messaged him saying he should have come in. Phil told her it was all an accident and to forget about it, but Dana kept asking if he was attracted to her. He told her no, and asked her not to tell me. He deleted all the messages to forget the incident. We checked his SD card, and the messages matched what he said. I'm still mad he didn't tell me in the first place. I invited Dana for brunch yesterday and confronted her. I told her Phil confessed everything. Initially, her story matched Phil's until they got to her apartment. She said she just hugged him for a great evening and felt Phil wanted more, but nothing happened. I asked why she invited him in, and she said it was to offer water and a snack because he'd been driving. I called her out on inviting my husband inside at 1 a.m., knowing he wanted more. She got defensive, saying I was being jealous and crazy. We argued, and she blurted out that she wasn't the one popping boners during the hug. I told her she's never seeing Phil again, and our friendship is over. She shouted that Phil loves her and doesn't act on it because of me, and went on about how she thinks he'd leave me for her if he could. She finally claimed she could make him happier than I ever could, and that he's starting to realize it. I walked away to avoid a bigger fight. I later talked to Phil about what Dana said. He admitted he did get aroused during the hug, but insisted it doesn't mean he has feelings for her. He says he's happy being married to me, and I'd like to keep it that way for the rest of his life. Even though I'm relieved that nothing major happened between them, it's still tough for me to wrap my head around everything. I mean, I'm pretty mad at Phil for hugging Dana in the middle of the night when she's barely wearing anything like, come on, he should know better. But then I also feel kind of dumb for not realizing my best friend had feelings for my husband and even encouraged them to go to that concert together. Winterfront 1431 chimed in with a comment. Make sure you tell everyone about Dana. I'd even change both your numbers. I wouldn't let this slide with Phil either. He kept this from you, let you hang around Dana, had a moment, whatever that means, then lied about it. I'd suggest setting up marriage counseling and making him earn your trust back. Yeah, I've made it very clear to Phil how upset I am. Dana taking off her shirt in the car was a huge red flag, and he should have told me everything instead of playing this game with her. Based on how reluctant he was to go to that concert, I wonder if she's put him in awkward spots before. We talked about it, and he said she never acted like this before, and honestly, the only time he's hung out with her was with me around. Encore Romance wrote, I'm glad you got to the bottom of it. I have to say, this story really got me. Usually I can be objective, but my gut was telling me your friend was suspicious. Dana was like a sister to me for all these years, and it hurts so much. It's always the people you least suspect. I can't believe she would do this to me, and it just feels so horrible. Leaks G commented, Don't let Phil off the hook. He made several bad decisions that night, and you two need to work on your relationship. Dana wasn't your friend because real friends don't hurt you like that. I agree, and I'm really upset with Phil. This isn't the first time he's hidden stuff to protect my feelings. He always tries to shoulder everyone's problems, and it's going to catch up with him someday. Story 2. My son broke my dad's favorite vase, and it's been a of a mess. When I was a teen, my dad bought this big glass vase and filled it with wine corks. It sat on a little table in the living room for years. We visit him monthly for lunch, and last October my son accidentally knocked over the table, breaking the vase. He was only 2 years old, and there was glass everywhere. My husband and I cleaned up and apologized, and I offered to replace the vase, but my dad said it was fine and he was just glad my son wasn't hurt. Over the next few months, I kept offering to replace it, but my dad kept saying no. However, earlier this year, he started grumbling about how much he loved that vase and how expensive it was. It escalated to the point where he'd mention my son breaking it almost every time we visited. He even joked about needing to hide his valuables from my kid. Last week, during a party at his place, a friend of his noticed the vase was gone and asked about it. My dad said, My little Dasa broke it, and they didn't replace it. My husband overheard, and we were both pretty upset. After the party, I confronted my dad, and we had a big argument. I told him he could either retract his forgiveness and work something out with me, or get over it and stop blaming my toddler. I won't stand for him calling my son names over this. In the Reddit comments, Dennis Ann K suggested, buy him a vase for every holiday, Father's Day, his birthday, Christmas, until he's swimming in vases and never wants to see another one. Unique Me One added, or get an empty vase and bring wine to drink, adding the cork to the vase each time to deal with his complaints. Another comment from Inori suggested a more dramatic approach. Get a new vase and some champagne, then pop the cork and let it smash the vase again. Marine0311 said, NTA. Your son was a toddler, and your dad should have toddler-proofed the house. You offered to replace the vase, and he declined. He can't keep complaining about it. On the flip side, Far Nefariousness 3 said, I wasn't allowed to run around in other people's homes, so I blame both the parents and your dad. But why didn't you just buy a new vase anyway? In the end, it seems everyone has their own take on the situation. So, I got him the exact same bottle and shipped it to his place. He was thrilled, even though he insisted he didn't need another one. When my friends and their kids visit, we usually hit up the park so the kids can run around. At my grandma's house, if the kids want to play, we sit on the porch and watch them. I think kids need to learn where they can and can't run. Has just a toddler, so he should have had some toys or been taken outside to play. I can't even imagine letting my kid run wild in my dad's house with all that glass around. My dad was wrong to complain. But honestly, you should have just replaced the vase right away. I mean, if your kid breaks something, just replace it. Asking if she had two vases is silly. Any reasonable person would just get a new one without fussing. I saw a comment from Far Nefariousness 773 saying he'd replace the vase if he heard a single complaint. I feel the same. Ope, original poster, popped in to clarify, saying they never let their toddler run freely in other people's homes. In this specific case, their son started running just seconds before the mishap, and they couldn't stop him in time. On future visits, they've been more vigilant. Their son is usually pretty chill, so this was out of character. Also, they offered to replace the vase a few times that day, but the dad said no. After his refusal, they didn't see a reason to buy a new one. Honestly, if someone offered to replace something and I declined, I wouldn't expect them to go ahead and do it anyway. But here's where it gets more complicated. OP says their dad kept bringing up the vase months later. The situation got worse because his comments about it intensified. Someone suggested the dad might have dementia since he's around 60. After reading all the comments, OP decided to offer to buy another vase one last time. They explicitly told the dad that if he said no but continued to complain, he wouldn't be allowed to see his grandson until he calmed down. The dad finally agreed, but the store where he bought the original vase no longer exists. So, OOP did some research and found a similar one at a nearby furniture store known for quality. During their monthly lunch at the dad's place, OOP gave him the new vase. The dad seemed grateful and had a sweet moment filling it with corks with his grandson. They thought the issue was resolved. But the next day the dad called and said he'd looked up the vase online, noticing it was cheaper than expected. He asked, "Are you sure this is the best you could find?" That's when OOP decided they were done with the passive aggressiveness. OOP told their dad they wouldn't be visiting his place anymore. If he wanted to see the family, he had to come to their place. The dad protested, but OOP stood firm. The dad never communicated his wishes clearly and still complained about the outcome. OOP felt done with being accused of being a bad person and didn't want that negativity around their son any longer. Now, OOP isn't sure about the future of their monthly lunches since the dad doesn't like driving to their place. Although OOP loves their dad, they're really disappointed. They think some time apart might be beneficial and are especially concerned about maintaining a positive relationship between their son and his grandfather. OOP mentioned the new vase cost about $100 and they don't live in the U.S. The dad couldn't remember the original price, just that it was more expensive. He wasn't attached to the vase itself, but to the corks inside, which he managed to salvage. Comments on the post were supportive, some pointing out how ridiculous it was for the dad to look up the price and still complain. They admired OOP for standing firm and trying to encourage the relationship between their son and his grandfather. OP hopes their dad realizes what's important and makes an effort. One commenter shared a similar experience of being made to feel awful for losing an old pitch pipe that came with a family heirloom violin. They looked up the cost of a replacement, just $4 on eBay, but their grandmother made them feel terrible about it. Hey, so here's the thing. I know it might sound a bit out there, but have you ever thought that maybe your dad could be dealing with dementia? People with dementia often latch on to specific ideas and keep asking the same questions over and over. It just hit me that your dad might be showing early signs of this. If it turns out to be dementia, getting him into treatment sooner rather than later could really help slow things down. I'm a social worker and I work with dementia patients all the time, so I've seen how important early intervention can be. Switching gears a bit, have you noticed how some people are never satisfied with anything? They just complain all the time because they love being the center of attention. It's so draining. Honestly, good riddance to that kind of negativity. I remember this one guy from college who was exactly like that. I figured him out right away because I'd met so many people like him before. What really annoys me is when they lie just to stir up drama. Like, at his own party, he was complaining and saying they never offered to replace something, which was totally untrue. That's a clear sign he just loves whining and causing a fuss.